Without black people, New Orleans would be a bad version of even Disneyland. I mean, the history and culture of New Orleans comes out of the suffering, the creativity of black people. And to have a New Orleans without black people would be to have nothing.
This is a city with roots, families, deep, way deep.
First, it starts with the whole kind of form of slavery that we had. And you know how the French people are. I mean, they enslave people, but they marry them, too.
The mouth of the Mississippi, man, the curve, Big Easy, you know, Crescent City. I mean, it's a hell of a thing to have a reputation to be known for as the #1 place where you can come buy a nigga.
The centuries of slavery in America are among the worst crimes in the country's history. But for a long time, depictions of American slavery, such as Steve McQueen's 12 Years a Slave, have centered on the cruelty of white Southern men. The abuses that white women committed were minimized. They weren't thought to be involved in the buying and selling of enslaved people or the running of plantations. Historians agreed that slavery was the business of men. But recent evidence has led to a reassessment.
So for a long time, historians thought that women were basically absent from the entire slave trade. But it turns out new research shows that they had a real stake in it.
Rebecca Jackson is The Economist's Southern correspondent.
From shipping slaves to buying and selling them at auction houses and setting up small businesses using their labor, white women were involved at every level of the American slave trade.
That's incredibly surprising. Tell me more about this, Becca.
So there's a new research paper that was published last month by economists at Ohio State University, and they analyzed data from the New Orleans slave market, which was the biggest of the antebellum era. And what they found is that women were buyers or sellers in 30% of all transactions, and almost 40% that involved female slaves. By matching the names of those women to census records, they also found that it wasn't just single or widowed women who were buying and selling slaves because they didn't have husbands to do that for them. Married ones were doing it too.
Tell me more about the research on this.
So this gets into some amazing research done by a historian called Stephanie Jones Rogers. And these are the first quantitative numbers put to a huge body of qualitative work that she's done over the years. She looked into all sorts of historical documents, ranging from diaries of these white women to court records. Some of the most amazing accounts from the time were from tourists visiting America from abroad. They would often go to slave markets in the South to see it as a sort of oddity attraction, and they actually recorded how active a role women played in them.
He sees a row of white women dressed in silks and satins and jewels observing the slave auction without any shame, without any qualms. Women are like passing by, they're going in, they're visiting, they're buying, they're taking enslaved people home. And so there are countless examples where this is the case. They're in the market.
These accounts suggest that women were far from innocent bystanders. In fact, they were co-conspirators.
Anyone who knows what love is will understand. Oh, they'll understand if they try love, they'll understand.
The Cows, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Monday, August 19, 2024. So I have been told. New Orleans, it is that time of year. Every August, try to make sure there's at least one broadcast where we focus on southern Louisiana, at least one, maybe bunches sometimes, but 19 years, Hurricane Katrina, levee failure, white people taking the opportunity to kill black people. This program reminded me some of our signature work over our 15 plus years of broadcasting has been New Orleans. So many guests and programs, but man, right at the center, at the beginning, really, 2009, A.C. Thompson, white vigilante violence after Hurricane Katrina. That's 2009. What we're talking about today is antebellum slavery times, but wow, the continuum in New Orleans. Once again, it is August. Every August, there should be just a little bit of time to, oh yes, Katrina and our looters. You can go out and do a little bit of looting just for old time's sake. Now, our broadcast for today, adding to our material on New Orleans, specifically the important work Stephanie Jones Rogers, they were her property, white women. Oh, I looked at the incorrect title. I was looking at the report that we're going to talk about today, but Stephanie Jones Rogers' work, they were her property. Such important scholarship. Everybody should have already read it. It's been out for some years. Read, study. Hopefully, we here at the C.O.W.S over our 15 years have emphasized the role of white women. You cannot have that word they said at the end from the Economist report, co-conspirators. You cannot have a system of racism without white women. That would be any era. You can't have a system of white supremacy racism without white women. There was a white woman governor during Hurricane Katrina that we are going to shoot looters. But again, that is a different era. The Economist, one of our listeners sent me that report where they were discussing slavery and the role of white women and really what's supposed to happen when you get really good scholarship. People build on your work. The great Stephanie Jones Rogers, spectacular effort. Let's go and add to that, and especially this is something where there is so much scholarship needed. What is the role of these white women? They are not just loafing around and getting the goodies or being brutalized by savage white men. That is not true at all. The report today, the Ohio State University economists who put this together, this correctly, her property transactions, white women, and the frequency of female ownership in the antebellum era, focused specifically on New Orleans, Louisiana. Wow. Fascinating to be able to dig through the catacombs and get some of the just raw, do some of the counting as they emphasize in the report. Yes, let's see how involved these white women were in all of this trading of niggras. Fascinating. So anxious to dive into some of the details of the report and even to remind, since they mentioned this is from scholars in Ohio State University. Haven't we talked about Ohio State a number of times over the past year? Thinking of the different alumni that we've talked about just in the last, 12 months? So we got Sue Klebold, the great Michael Swango, the one and only Jeffrey Dahmer. He should have a statue. Like, who is more famous at OSU than Jay Dahmer? Really? Come on. Anywho, joining us today, maybe he will challenge Dahmer, be more famous and important by the time things are said and done. Co-author of the report we're discussing today, Her Property Transactions. Thankful to have him sharing a bit of his summer evening. Mr. Benton Wishart. Mr. Wishart, are you with us, sir?
Yes, I am. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your Monday evening with us. We thought we were going to have Dr. Trevon Logan with us as well, co-author of the report, but he had a conflict come up this evening, so he's not with us. But thankfully, we have Mr. Wishart with us to discuss the great report here. For listeners, I'm sure we have a number of folks, this is their first time hearing about you and this great work. Anything you'd like to tell us briefly about who you are, the work that you do, sir?
Yeah, I recently graduated from Ohio State University with a degree in economics. Through my time there, I took several classes with Dr. Logan and then asked him if I was able to be a research assistant with him on any projects, and this one came to mind. So he was very interested in building on Stephanie Jones Rogers' work and really adding a quantitative side to the research. And so I took a strong hold of the data side of that, and we worked for 2 years to put this report out.
Wow. And this just came out really just a couple months ago in the spring of 2024.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, April, early May. We started this in about August or September of 2022. So there's a lot of data to sort through, and I'm sure we'll get into that, and I can really describe it here shortly.
Wow. That's so 2022 that's right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Did that delay you all's research in any way, or was that not a big problem?
It wasn't a very big problem at all for us. A lot of this was I was able to do remotely. And at that point at Ohio State, a lot of the in-person meetings were allowed once again, so it wasn't too big of a factor in our research. What that could have delayed was us presenting the information if this was maybe 2 years earlier we had started it, because we did present this paper in Boston in March of this year and then in Columbus in April of this year, and then Dr. Logan also presented it in Barcelona in June of this year.
Oh, okay. Fascinating. Great. Glad it's getting more. It should get more publicity, correct some of the major lies, in my opinion, consistently diminishing the role of white women in the system of white supremacy. I guess for folks who've not seen a picture of you, you are a white man. Is that true?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I guess also, since I was checking, did you just get back from the Olympics competing in track field, anything?
No, I did not. I did track in high school, but I did not. I was not good enough to go to the Olympics.
Okay. I was like, wow.
Although I wish. That would have been awesome.
That's what I was thinking. Like, I looked and I saw, like, whoa, does this dude do track? Like, what? What is going on?
I used to, yeah, several years ago. Yeah.
Okay, congrats. That's awesome. I could not do hurdles, long jump, any of that stuff. I would have had some amazing questions if you had been at the Olympics. Like, whoa, but not that far. Okay.
Yeah, I sure wish. That would have been great.
Right on, right on. This broadcast, the term, it seems like you're working this research on slavery, a lot to do with racism. This program, I use the term racism and white supremacy as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can see from this work alone how, not only was it a massive player in their involvement, but how their involvement has been diminished over the course of the history of economic history as a subject. And I'm glad to, take part in some of the research that goes to show that this system was in place and that white women at the time were incredibly involved. Like said earlier, 30% of all transactions included white women, 40% when talking about female slaves. So I absolutely can agree with that, and I think this is just even more evidence that system exists.
Right on. Much obliged for the response. You said you're a white man. What compelled you, or what I don't know, motivated you to seek out this specific subject matter for research?
Right. So I started by taking a class with Dr. Logan. It was an economic history of America, and some massive parts of that were discussing segregation in America, along with black names in America, and then also some parts of slavery in America over the years. So I knew that, Dr. Logan was an incredible economist and researcher, and just to get involved in any way in his research would have been and is an incredible opportunity. And it wasn't necessarily like I knew or that I had seen like a job posting for it. I really just wanted to get involved with his work because he's an incredible economist, and whatever it ended up being, I was happy to help him out with. So it ended up being this, and I'm grateful and thankful for that. Just that I could help out with the work and also be listed as a co-author, which didn't necessarily need to happen. And I give massive props to Dr. Logan for including me as a co-author. When I started this, I thought I would get a nice little piece in the acknowledgments section of the paper, but I'm honored to be listed as the co-author as well.
Bravo, hard work. Wow, so I'm just processing. I'm making sure I understand what you told us correctly. So you went to Dr. Logan's class, economist, black male Dr. Logan, and you're taking his class or classes, and he's including a lot of information on the system of white supremacy, segregation specifically, and how that's impacted economic history in the United States, slavery, that sort of thing. And you decide that you want to be involved doing research with him. It seems like you didn't know it was going to be this project specifically, but just some sort of research, and he took you on board, ended up being this project, and then, oh wow, I ended up being a co-author, more than I bargained for. Is that kind of a sloppy, accurate paraphrase?
Yeah, exactly correct.
Okay. Wow, wow. Okay. And who, well, I don't know. So was he already working on this project, or did you all kind of start this together, her property transactions?
Yeah, so we started it together. I know he had previously read the book by Stephanie Jones Rogers, and it was and is an incredible qualitative amount of information on the subject. It's really the first in history to give that new light to females' involvement. It was really novel findings, and he just wanted to see what the quantitative data actually looked like. So we got several different pieces of data, two different transaction records, and then one record of runaway slaves, which was compiled in 1872 by abolitionist William Still. And we went through those three pieces of data, and I assigned a gender. And at first, we just wanted to see to what level were females involved. We didn't really have a goal, and neither of us knew that it would be to the extent that we came out with. But yeah, it really started with, we just want to see the quantitative aspect of this. And, it ended in some really novel findings on the quantitative side, which absolutely support what Stephanie Jones Rogers found on the qualitative side of the research.
Counting is important. When you two, I guess, formulated the idea to expand on Stephanie Jones Rogers' work, who was your intended audience for this project? Was this like an academic report? Was this for other economists? Was this for lay people like myself? Who were you thinking was going to read this?
Yeah, I mean, anything that we were planning on writing absolutely was meant for first and foremost for research purposes, and then for other economists to build on. But I mean, the more involved that everybody gets, the better. And I also really give thanks to the economists for putting their piece on this project out, because I think it really did involve a lot of people who are outside the bubble of economics in America, which is, the vast majority of people who also deserve to know things like this. This started as econometrics and data and quantitative data, and that's read a report on it, a paper that could eventually be published. And I think it ended with some information that should be available to everybody in the United States from all levels. I mean, I can think of any high school history class, American history class in the country needs to at some point involve this work. Not, it doesn't even have to involve our names, just get it out there that this is, still an expanding topic. It's still an important topic, and it's a topic that everybody should understand as they're learning about American history.
Hear, hear. Context of White Supremacy. Benton Wishart correcting a lie that white women, they weren't involved in this. This is white men. They don't even say white men's work frequently. They'll just say men's work, slavery, this is men's work, which is often the same thing that they'll say about current racism. Both are lies. Co-conspirators, white men, white women. Speaking, I guess, of what were the demographics of your classes with Dr. Logan? These are economics classes. Do you like the other folks who were seated next to you? Do you remember?
It was a good mix of people. I think these were high-level classes, so a lot of the times it was juniors and seniors involved in economics at Ohio State. There's some other economics classes that are a little bit lower level, easier for people who might be finance who need an econ credit to take. But these were absolutely very high level. They had some prerequisites that you had to be. You didn't have to be, but primarily economics majors, especially in quantitative economics.
Oh, okay. In terms of number of white students, non-white students, do you recall?
I don't necessarily recall. It was, a good split. I would say probably very similar to just the breakdown in that there is currently at Ohio State. I know there are white, black, Asian people all involved in the classes. But yeah, I'm not necessarily sure of the numbers. When I first took his class, this was 3 years ago, so I think it was spring of my freshman year. I actually took my first class with him. So, and it was interesting. It wasn't necessarily like a class on the history of slavery, but it was just on the history of economics in America. So we did touch for about half of the semester on slavery, on segregation, on black names, but we also hit subjects like the history of the economic history of women in America, which include things like birth control and their effect on the country. There's also an economic history on segregation, which Dr. Logan's done a ton of work on, and then also, black names, which he's also incredibly involved in and has several papers out on. So we did touch on many subjects in the class, and yeah, the demographics were definitely a very similar split to the demographics of Ohio State as a whole.
Okay. In the report co-authored, Her Property Transactions, White Women and the Frequency of Female Ownership in the Antebellum Era, you all point out that the data that you put forward is conservative. What do you mean when you say conservative in this context, and why is that important?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very interesting. It's important that we don't get too ahead of ourselves. A lot of this data, so the transaction records especially, they don't list the genders of the people on the buy side or the sell side for the transactions. Now, for the slaves, they did list the genders, which gave us a very easy way, once I assigned genders, to find the breakdowns of the involvement and how that can differ based on the gender of the slave. But I had to go into each separate name and really look at the demography of the name and see, in 1850 and 1830 and 1860, what was the breakdown on gender for each specific name. So, there's a lot of places where you could over explain and over report females. So we did our best to only assign the female gender when we could absolutely prove that that name was belonging to a female. Now, the way that I did that was just to go into the census report and search up the name that was listed in our transaction data and see what people self-assigned their gender as on the census. If that was primarily female, and by primarily like 90% or more female, we would list that as female in our data as well. But there's some interesting names where you have to be careful on that, like Francis. Francis is spelled one way is a male name and the other is a female name. So it's important to make that distinction and not get too ahead of ourselves in the reporting of the female gender owning that name. So I can absolutely say with certainty that these numbers that we got are the floor for female involvement. If data collection was better at the time, these numbers would likely look a little bit different in the way of females being more involved than what we reported. But we wanted to make sure from an academic standpoint when talking about this subject that we only reported female involvement when we could absolutely prove that they were involved in the transaction.
Much obliged. When I read the explanation for conservative and why you all did that, I kept thinking, particularly once I got to the end of the report, like, wow, it's probably a lot higher than this, given
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and he said the same thing. So yeah, and you talk consistently how conventional narratives prior to Stephanie Jones Rogers' work that white women were not involved, and or if they were involved, they were compelled, maybe they were widowed, and they just had to take over. The white man has fallen by the wayside type of a thing. And so you all going through a lot of data to unpack all of this. Some of this starts very early. This is on page 6 of your report, looking at some of the statutes in southern states. And you write that married women's a comprehensive measure of married women's access to property, claims about status being debt shields only ignores the fact that the earliest acts were passed in southern states were specifically about empowering the marital rights of white women over enslaved individuals. For example, the earliest act passed in the United States was the Mississippi Married Women's Property Law of 1839. This law was explicit in awarding married white women ownership status over enslaved individuals. Section 2 of the Act states that hereafter, when any woman possessed of a property in slaves shall marry, her property in such slaves and their natural increase shall continue to her, notwithstanding her coverture, and she shall have, hold, and possess the same as her separate property, exempt from any liability from the debts or contracts of the husband, and further noted additional property rights after marriage by stipulating that when any woman during coverture shall become entitled to or possessed of slaves by conveyance, gift, inheritance, distribution, or otherwise, such slaves, together with their natural increase, shall insure and belong to the wife in like manner as is above provided to slaves which she may possess at the time of marriage. And I will stop there, but you all point out consistently this is about white women having economic independence that is based on literally black slaves. So they have a vested interest in controlling their niggras in Louisiana. Well, this isn't even Louisiana. This is Mississippi. But I thought this stunning illustration. Can you add a little bit more, Mr. Wishart?
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Logan jokes that this is such a Mississippi story that they would only extend these rights to females at the time, which was, you know, a lesser class of the white male, when it involved being able to own another person. So, interestingly enough, Mississippi was, you know, the front runner for the first and likely only time in expanding rights of some people when it involved, you know, their ownership of another group of people. So this started with Native American law and the Native Americans at the time allowing their females to buy and sell slaves. And the Mississippi legislature thought, you know, that's not entirely fair because the white women in our state are not allowed to do that. So let's expand on their rights so that they may also have the right to buy and sell slaves. And this gets into the data that we found, and especially the state-by-state data, and showing that females at the time were only more likely to be on the buy side than males at the time from the state of Mississippi. So it took quick and immediate effect on females being able to be allowed into the market, and those females responded by getting more active in the market than even men from Mississippi at the time. So I thought that was incredibly interesting when we discovered that. This was at the end of our research when we were able to break it down state by state once all of the gender was assigned and really see where the females that got involved, what states they were from. And in 1830, they were only involved from the state of Mississippi, out of all the states recognized and included in the data.
Wow, that I was stymied by two different things there. I'd have to see if I can work my brain computer to capture both, because that's in the report, but just I had to read that about 3 or 4 times. I said, I'm a lay person, I'm not an economist, maybe I didn't read it correctly. Then he said it again right there, that white women were more active in selling niggras, slaves, in Mississippi than white men. Did I hear that correct?
Exactly correct, yes.
Whew. I read it in the report, and it staggered. Now, that's the type of thing now we've been told white women weren't involved at all. They're more active?
Yeah.
Whew. Wow.
More active on the buy side and on the sell side from Mississippi. Now, it's interesting, from 1830, the sell side of slaves, women were quite active from 4 specific states, that is Mississippi, Missouri, Alabama, and then actually also D.C. But what's interesting is then that could definitely be explained by women being widows and getting those slaves allocated towards them only in death, or maybe in inheritance, so in death from their fathers, and then selling them on the market, which was allowed at the time. But on the buy side, they were only allowed to purchase slaves from the state of Mississippi, and in fact, they were more involved in that market than men at the time.
The other portion that staggered me, and this is in the written report where you all write that, and it's there twice in the law, that white women, they maintain rights over their slave property and the natural increase. That curious phrasing, all of the offspring that these, and we've already talked about the white women are more likely to be involved in transactions involving black female slaves. So any offspring that they have, natural increase, that belongs to the white women as well. I thought, whew, that has come up so many times. That was another one where I said, wow, so white men like Thomas Jefferson, where he talked about that is integral. You can't really run a quality slave plantation without rape. You got to have natural increase in order for this to be a profitable enterprise. Wow, white women would also have a vested economic interest. Make sure she gets raped. Got to get her pregnant 2-3 times. So natural increase. Why, unless I am misinterpreting natural increase, is that accurate, Mr. Wishart?
Yeah, absolutely. They are. Yeah, you're correct. Any offspring that the slave might have is then, upon birth, owned by the person that owned the mother. So, yeah, for these examples, you're 100% right.
And for me, that sort of thing is important. I know this is Mississippi, but the same way that I look at this for Thomas Jefferson, Sally Hemings, and white men, I have a vested economic interest in all of this rape. I mean, hey, all these Sally Hemings, octoroons and set, that's more money. Even if I don't like, well, that's great if I don't like them, because now I can sell them. And Stephanie Jones Rogers talks about that. Sometimes black female comes back and, oh man, my children are gone, and white woman is counting a satchel of dollar bills. She would have a vested interest in female slaves being raped. And that is, I mean, just looking at the economics of this.
Yeah, it's incredibly interesting. That, jargon I wasn't familiar with at the start of this project, but it has been eye-opening through the process of the research and in writing the paper. Again, it goes back to, I'm just thankful that more people are able to learn about this subject and really understand the state of America and the state of the economy and how it was so different at that time. So incredibly interesting.
It pops up again. This is on page 7. You're all right. Not only are the enslaved peoples themselves independently owned by the wife, their natural increase accrued to her alone as well. The law further stipulates that a married woman's enslaved people transfer to her children, not her husband, upon death. I thought that was fascinating too. Like, wow, in each instance, this act not only shields enslaved people from creditors, but it also creates and codifies a distinct economic interest that white married women would have in enslavement as a means of economic independence. That I also found staggering, because it seems like so much of this white, that's when they say women, they mean white. That's what I've said for years. When they say woman, they mean white woman. So much of this economic independence for women, white, is based, what I said before, is based on their investment in white supremacy, the ownership of black people. Like, was that something that you learned in this project in terms of this being codified in law for the independence of white women?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was something I'm sure that we discussed through class or through any other economic classes, but that exact, the statement there is something that I learned through this project, and it's interesting what it was born from, and it was from a debtor going to a female's owned slave to collect the slave so that he may sell that and make up for a debt that was brought upon by that woman's husband. So that's why it was so important in that Mississippi legislature, was that a husband's debts could not be paid off by the forced collection of his wife's held slaves. So that is something that I absolutely learned while partaking in this project.
Wow. Context of white supremacy. It seems so much of these laws were about shielding white women if anything should happen to their white husband, creditors are pursuing him, or he dies, or anything of that nature, or I guess if he even is trying to steal her slaves' offspring. So much of these laws in these specific states that you mentioned were about protecting her independence, so that she is totally, these are my niggras, and this is the bank. You all even stipulate that. This is at a time where you didn't have ATM machines and all that. Like, slaves are the bank, literally. So this is independent wealth for white women if they're married or not. Well, most of them are married, but independent, so they don't have to be totally, husband has got all of the finance in the marriage. I had no idea that, and that is totally contrary to the way I think that we are taught to think about antebellum slavery, U.S. history, white women then and now. In Stephanie Jones Rogers, she talks about a component of this where white women, what I said before, they financially could benefit from prostitution, really, sending their black female slaves to brothels in places like New Orleans and such. That could be a source of income. It made me think when I read that passage where you talked about prime black males, these were the top slaves that you want to get. My brain computer, I had been thinking before, like, oh, okay, you want to get field hands and all the rest of it, you can stud them too. But then I had to think too, rethinking Rufus, like, do you think some of the interest in these prime black males could be sexual interest as well?
You know, that's something I'm not sure of. I never looked directly at that. That's a great thought there. Now, the interesting part is, you know, if they used them, it was who were they using them to procreate with? You know, if it was a slave that they owned, then absolutely, absolutely, I could see that being the case. But the important piece there is the ownership. So owning the woman that was due to give birth, that was absolutely used as really one of the only ways that females at the time could get involved in the markets at the time and in the economy, in the South especially.
One of the only ways that they could get involved in the market was
for them to own a female slave that was due to give birth or able to give birth at some point.
I got it. Not just female slave, but childbearing age, where reproductive. That's why I said you would have a vested interest in them being raped. I was thinking not the stud component, because that would be kind of common in terms of, you know, why black males would be a prime sale at auction. Are you familiar with Thomas A. Foster's work, Rethinking Rufus?
No, I'm not.
Okay. It's amazing work. It came out around the same time that you all started working on this project, but it talks about the sexual abuse of black male slaves, and how that also is something that is not talked about, and how we do not think about things like lynching and such as sexual violence, but castration was often a major part of these acts. Even current times in Mississippi, are you familiar with the current case of the Goon Squad in Mississippi? This was over the past year, 6 officers, or it was a group of officers, sorry, in Rankin County. They took 2 black males, poured chocolate sauce on them, used a dildo on them, made these black males shower together, shot one in the mouth. Are you familiar with this case?
I had not heard anything about that.
They just got convicted. It was massive. I think this is one of the largest convictions of police officers in Mississippi state history. This was just within the last year. But I keep bringing this case up all the time because I think this is very indicative of white racist behavior for a long time. But that's rethinking Rufus, that this sort of conduct is long running, that the same sort of rape and sexual abuse that's been done to black females has also been done to black males, but we just don't talk about that. But that's what kind of came to mind when I read that portion really quick about black males being prime at the auction. That, I bet that's probably a part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The component where you all I'd never heard the term. I said that about so much in the text. What exactly is a certificate of good character? Because this seems specific to Louisiana.
Right, yeah. So that was necessary for about a year in Louisiana. It was enacted in 1829 and then actually stopped being a thing in 1831. So that is where a major piece of our data came from, was from those 1830 transactions. So the state of Louisiana required any slave that was bought or sold within their state boundaries to have a certificate of good character accompanying that sale. Now that is really important for our data because it led to notarized facts and information on not only the slave, but also the person buying and selling them. This is a time where literacy rates were low. I joke, it's amazing how many ways people found the way to spell Amy at the time, like a name that really has, 2, maybe 3 spellings. I mean, I saw it in the data with 5, 6, 7 spellings. So if a name as simple as Amy could be spelled and repeated and respelled so many different ways by so many people who are very marginally educated, that really goes to question the data in total and how able we are to assign gender to a name that might be misspelled and misrepresented. So those certificates of good character were very similar to sort of real estate sales in that there's an added aspect of legality to them. So not only was it, someone stating their name and then someone transcribing their name and then that same person later saying their name to a census reporter, well, now added in a whole aspect of legality and required a notary.
Wow. I read that. I said, man, I think I would struggle to get one of those now for someone to come in. Can we get me a certificate to say I'm a good dude? Like,
right.
But,
yeah.
You explained that in the data as well about the names and even the gender. Certainly now with all of the you can't be binary in your thinking and all the red. Did you all get any pushback on that and saying that you can't be that dichotomous even in assigning gender?
We didn't get any pushback on it. I think it was important that we used the census at the time and seeing, what people self-reported their gender as. It not only took out a lot of the questions on the demography side of it, and first and foremost, that is a ton of names to research the total demography on and how that name has shifted over time. And there's not even many good ways to really do that other than through the census. So I think it really added a sort of ease to it. Like, hey, it's the same for every single name. If 90% or more people said that they were females with this name, it's a female name at the time. There are some names where you could really expand on the demography of it and how it shifted and how the different places that name came from have really influenced the name and what type of gender it's assigned to. But having it be just on the census was a very important piece for us because it created a similarity for each name that it had to be reported as a female in the census for this name. And then for all other, however many names were on there, 14,000 different names, 40,000 people. That was a very important part of our research.
Conservative data collection, as he stated before. About
there we go. Exactly.
What classifies. I was also staggered. I'm ignorant. I'm still learning. I had no idea that they have reports about female forenames and all of that. So you all were kind of able to use that as well to kind of go through and match names to figure out, okay, we think this is a female, we think this is a male, that sort of thing. Like, wow, I don't know. Is that something you knew about before?
Not in the slightest, actually. One important example that I give is the name Valerie. And if you were to think about that now, the name Valerie is likely, you would think of as a female. Well, at the time, it was actually a male name coming from Russia. So that's one that really caught me off guard. If I was just like, hey, what gender is this name assigned to? That would have been wrong in the data. But I went to the census and I look up Valerie and almost everybody is a male. That's one example of where it caught me, and I'm glad that it did, because we got it right, that's actually a male name in the 1830s and 1860s, whereas now it's very commonly a female name.
That's fascinating. I almost want to say I might have met a Valerie. I have to think of it. It's rare. I do think of it as female, but that is fascinating. You all write in the conclusion, if any listeners have a quick question they want to get into Mr. Wishart before he departs, *61. In the conclusion, you all write, importantly, the narrative of passive, fictive ownership among women has been codified with few attempts to verify it empirically. The actual counts show a large and active involvement among women in the market for enslaved people. Far from being passive, women were a significant fraction of those active in market transactions for the enslaved, participating in buying and selling in roughly equal proportion. What can you help us understand? What has this codification process been to purify white women's role in all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So by codified, we really mean that it's sort of repeated and accepted without investigation. So it sort of became an established fact without anyone looking to see if it's consistent with the available evidence. Because historians largely agreed that women weren't involved in the transaction, they never looked at the available evidence to see if it matched up to the record. That's really where our novel findings come from, is Dr. Logan saying, hey, let's actually go into the data, which these data sources have been around forever, and can we see if this sort of, established fact is actually true or not. And again, 30% of all transactions involve female buyer or sellers, and for women it was 40% for women slaves. So that codification is just a long line of historians not questioning, is this fact true? Were women involved, or were they fictive or reluctant owners? And that reluctance comes from them inheriting the slave through them being a widow or through their father or brother dying. Well, no, it wasn't that. They were very active, especially as they gained those state rights to be both on the buy side and the sell side of these transactions.
I am a lay person, but I feel like frequently when discussing these matters with regards to racism, I end up saying, is it accurate to say, particularly when you talk about these historians who did not investigate and just ran with this, saying, oh no, this was just the work of white men. Is this mostly, not exclusive, but mostly white historians, white men and white women who have been involved in this work?
The field is absolutely dominated by white people. I would say less now, but I mean, since this became a real subject, it's largely been white people who are involved in the actual research on the topics. So yeah, I think you could very easily say that.
Right on. If that being the case, that's one where I say, man, it seems like it might be true that these white people deliberately lied to exonerate white women and just say, we'll just say that this is white men, because I've seen this pattern consistently. This happened with lynchings as well. We've had white female historians even on the program where the same thing, it's talked about in a widespread manner, that lynchings, this too is the work exclusively of white men, they got pictures, white women right there, and lots of them over and over and over, but it's this same willful lying, and with a purpose, it seems, so that we can have this pure, sanctimonious image of white women who have to be defended against savage black people. And I'll ask, is it accurate to say this seems like deliberate lying? Does evidence, logic seem to support that?
deliberate lying, it's hard for me to say with certainty. Now, I can say for sure that these white women from the time absolutely played their part in diminishing their role in it. Many of these memoirs didn't mention it. Their own personal writings of the time didn't mention them owning slaves or taking part in the transactions, when clearly they did, until Stephanie Jones Rogers came along and really looked at so many examples of the memoirs and found that they actually were incredibly involved, which led to this research. Now, it made it very easy, at least I can say, for people to diminish the white women involvement because of their own, those white women from the time not reporting it themselves, not being the primary source that actually establishes the fact that they were involved in those sorts of things. So I'm not sure if it was deliberate lying, but surely it was an easy thing to not pay attention to or not report on from a historian standpoint, because it was just so hard to find it out in their personal memoirs. It was hard to see them writing about these sorts of things at the time.
I don't know if I mentioned it before, but Stephanie Jones Rogers is a black female. You said it was hard for them to see, white historians hard to see or hard to find. I mean, Stephanie Jones Rogers is an amazing scholar. All props to her. But I mean, now we're saying that all these other decades of white historians, they lacked similar competence or research skills to find the materials that Stephanie Jones Rogers did?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely left out of a lot of these reports when discussing slavery. So I can say that with certainty.
Right. That's what you said, that they don't see it. That's why I'm asking, do we think that there's something, Stephanie Jones Rogers has some sort of unique skill set or unique vision that allowed her to gain access to this material that the other because we're talking generations of white scholars who missed out on all this material? Is that what we're saying?
Right. I think that, certainly that could be the case, her coming from the standpoint of being a black woman and maybe, not having an added vision, but maybe the knowledge of this is something that could actually be true, and let's look deeper at it than just simply looking at a few memoirs and saying, oh, they weren't involved. So that could absolutely be the case, that, whatever it may be, she chose to look at many, many, many memoirs, many personal records, a lot of information, pictures to really see if these women were involved, rather than coming from potentially a white male standpoint and saying, well, we don't see it in this memoir, we don't see it in this memoir, it didn't happen. And then that being repeated over decades of time in the subject of history.
Have you heard that in terms of contemporary discussions of the system of white supremacy, racism, where it's talked about as just white patriarchy, white men? Have you heard that discussion currently?
Oh yeah, I've heard of that discussion. Absolutely. That's definitely something that Dr. Logan is heavily involved in too, and wanting people from different races getting involved in the subject, not only history, but also economics in total, and seeing, how many new PhD graduates are white versus black. And it's a disproportionate number. Absolutely.
White women and white men PhD grads, as opposed to the non-white grads, male or female. Just that pattern where it's lynching, slavery, current day, where white women are excluded. When we talk about who practices white supremacy, racism, it can't be that it's just white men, co-conspirators, as they said at the Economist. That's why I think, or why I lean to, I think this is deliberate lying, where people did have access to this information and they just lied. It's the same, they can look at the lynching photographs, and I don't think everybody is blind. I don't think this is colorblind because they're black and white photos. You can see females, you can see a dress just like I can, and the same pattern holds there. I just think there's a lot of seems like that is a big pattern to make sure that we don't think of white women as a racist, which, no. This also I thought was really important, and on the same subject matter, right in the conclusion, this is on page 26, you all write, the role of gender equity in property rights has not been featured as a potential mechanism for the persistence and continued explanatory power of these institutions. The political and social support for racially unequal policy from white women post-bellum, after slavery, could be better understood as a continuation of racial antebellum institutions that were relatively egalitarian with respect to women's economic interests. I thought that was so important, Mr. Wishart. I had to change my highlight color. Can you explain that to me like I was a high school dropout?
Yeah. So, this sort of these transactions obviously were not allowed after the Civil War, but it is absolutely an example of white women being able to get involved in the market solely due to putting down people of color, and that absolutely could explain things like Jim Crow laws and segregation and all of the future legislation that came out that stymied the ability for people of color to get into the market and really only allow white people to be there. And I think that looking at it in the context of this project can really add to one's understanding of, the post-bellum early America, in which technically via the Constitution, people of color were now free, but how free are you if you can't work and you can't go to school, and et cetera, et cetera?
Absolutely. And extending egalitarian efforts in suppression of black people. That's because I really don't think of, I think you all touched on that in the report, I don't think of Mississippi as being someplace that you would think of as being in the vanguard of women's rights, or, we're going to make sure that everyone is treated correct. I do not think of Mississippi as that at all. But for white women, yes. Let's see.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to putting other people down, Mississippi is quite the front for that, and the egalitarian ability to do that. So it was very interesting, and like I said, Dr. Logan says, quite the Mississippi story.
Even though it's supposed to be focused on Louisiana, which it is, but I mean neighbors, and really just speaks to the widespread pattern of all of this, which is, I think, why we'd said at the beginning, this is probably really conservative. White women were probably way more involved and way beyond just New Orleans in all of this, directly involved, not even, get to indirectly. The Black African dialed in with a question. Benton Wishart, co-author of the report. Again, kudos to Dr. Logan. The Black African, did you have a question for Mr. Wishart? You should be with us.
Thank you, sir. I have a few quick questions. So when I Googled, I guess, the name of the article, your name shows up first. So who did, I guess, most of the work? Was it you or Dr. Logan?
Yeah, so Dr. Logan did put as the corresponding author. I did much of the work when it comes to the data and the cleaning of the data and assigning the genders, and then seeing the race of involvement. Now, Dr. Logan absolutely did the historical work, and not only the historical work in this project, but just, the having more education to be able to talk about something like this. It was Dr. Logan. He he did all the history. He knew about the Mississippi state legislature and what they did for the subject, and then he put the project together. So I really did a lot of the data work, which is, likely why I was the corresponding author, just so that data questions would go to me. But yeah, he did primarily all of the historical context on the paper.
Okay. And then when you did this, you weren't an economist yet, correct? You hadn't.
Right. Yeah, I was an undergraduate. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was an undergraduate researcher.
Okay. So what? How much like data research knowledge or experience did you have? Like, what kind of data collection and data cleaning systems were you using?
So this was my first research project that I worked on from an economist standpoint. For the data cleaning, a lot of it was very manual, primarily because we had to go in and look at each singular name. So like I described earlier, we went to the census to see the self-reporting of the gender of each name. From there, we did have to clean the data and getting out duplicate females, just so that we could look these specific names and the dates up in the census reports to see if they were married or unmarried. But again, once we found them in the census reports, a lot of figuring out if they were married or their age at the time was also manual labor. So this was just looking at the breakdown on the census and seeing who the primary member of the household was, and then relating their ages to the female that we were researching to see if that was someone that maybe they were married, or maybe the female still lived with her father, and seeing the other people in the census household to kind of figure out that relationship that was involved there. But yeah, much of, in terms of data cleaning, it was all just in Excel. And then in terms of actually looking at each female, that was all pretty manual in the census.
Okay. Last question. What did the white women in your life think about this work that you did? I guess, moms, girlfriends, aunts, grandmas.
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Unfortunately, both my grandmas are passed away, so that would have been, a better historical knowledge of the topic and what they had learned maybe in school. I think that a lot of them were primarily, happy that this was being researched and was being found out. I don't think I could say that I had any real negative reactions to the research that we were doing or the findings that we came out with. It was largely, gratitude towards the research and also gratitude towards being able to read new information on the topic and really see where this has taken us.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Much obliged, the Black African. The report that I have, and I guess, it depends. The report I got, it looks like it was the May 2024, but Mr. Wishart's name is first, and then Dr. Logan's name is below that. I think I've seen it a few times that way on the reports. Yeah, have you seen it that way, where your name is first and then Dr. Logan's name is second?
Yeah, that's largely listed as being the corresponding author. No, I think I never got a full explanation from Dr. Logan. That's mainly because I was involved in the data. So when people reach out with data-specific questions, which is always a potential with academic research, that, if they reached out to Logan and it was a very specific question on maybe a single point on the data cleaning methods, that's something that I would know because I worked directly with the data, whereas he was, the overarching author of the paper with the historical knowledge on what to write and what to include and, how to write an academic paper in general, because I had never done that before and he had. But that's largely, that first author is the main contact point for other people who are wondering about specific things regarding the data, which, because I worked primarily with the data, it just made sense that I was the one that would get the first email about it.
I'm just remembering the context of our discussion earlier on when you talked about just thinking you would get a little footnote or something, and yours is the first name on the report. Like, wow. Like, I thought this was even for listeners' context, I thought this was his report. He just graduated, white male, no congratulations, nothing against that, but I mean, he just graduated. Dr. Logan is a professor. He has a doctorate. Woo, that
Absolutely.
is wacky. Like, man, he could have published this report and not even put your name on it. Is that true?
I absolutely. I owe him a great deal of gratitude for even being mentioned at all. So, yeah, deeply appreciative.
Wow, that is amazing for sure. I'd be grateful too. Hook him up with something great. You did mention his paper, and I thought Dr. Logan was going to be with us. Conflict, we missed out. Rats. Would have been even cooler to hear all this with him here to respond. I read the report that he did about distinctively black names, which I thought was fascinating for a myriad of reasons. But I did at least ask, since you're familiar with that, you mentioned the report. Did he say whether or not his name, Trevon, is that a distinctively black name?
I don't think we mentioned that exactly in class. I do think that I've seen him discuss that before, maybe on Twitter. I would not currently be able to reproduce what he said to any measure that would give it credit. But yeah, that's definitely something that I do think that he's discussed before over Twitter, or I don't think we talked about that in class. That was I think a Twitter post.
Okay, I had that on my list to ask him. I'm gonna have to go look at his Twitter feed to see, like, I'd be curious even to see, like, what's been his experience with, particularly if that is that the correct pronunciation? Is it Trevon? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, Trevon, Trevon. I always refer to him. Well, I always refer to him as Dr. Logan, but Trevon, I believe, is the correct pronunciation.
Trevon, okay, Trevon. I was thinking, had Florida and all that on my mind, but Trevon, okay. I would have even that. Like, do people call you Trevon or anyway? I have to go look at his Twitter feed to see what he had to say about all of that. Our caller, 2262. Did you have a question for Mr. Wishart? 2262.
Yes, sir. May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Thank you guys for taking my call, and greetings to our guest. Thank you. I wanted to ask, prior to you getting involved with the research project, how did you support yourself, sir?
I'm sorry, in what context?
Financially, life.
I worked a summer job, and I actually own a landscaping company previously, so that was mainly my income through the first part of undergrad. And then once I started working for OSU, I was only able to work 15 hours a week maximum, and that was my income throughout the both semesters.
Okay. Thank you for your response. Considering that now that you're a published right at the moment, what does that do for you as a professional, being published?
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're not quite published yet. We have submitted the paper for publication. As a professional, it definitely opens doors for me to potentially work on other research projects or maybe go back to school and get a PhD, which is definitely on my list of things to do. Quite the time commitment, but I think it would be incredible. And being a part of this project specifically, and also being so involved, definitely gives me, I would hope, a better chance of maybe being accepted in some PhD programs. So that is definitely a door that was opened that would not otherwise be without it.
Okay. Thank you for your response. My final question would be, considering your research and how you went into the numbers about how wealth was distributed and how the wealth of a white woman was separated in Mississippi from the white man, and how much generated for her as an individual, what are your thoughts on reparations for acts of slavery?
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know, I'm not sure it would be, I think, very difficult to work that way back to the specific woman involved. But I mean, absolutely, if that was able to be done, again, through the census, it was an area of sometimes improper data collection. Now, I think if that connection is able to be made, then, I mean, absolutely, that's a possibility that could stem from projects like this and future research that's done because of projects like this.
Okay. I'm sorry, I do have one last question. From your research, and thank you for your response, do you see any type of research that would work against the idea of reparations? And I mean on a federal level, not just individual level.
I'm not sure on a federal level of the research that could be done against, given our research. I do think that there's a lot more research that could be done more in the sense of for reparations, because this is such an early discovery on the topic. I think there's a lot more research there to be done. There's a lot more information to find out about these topics and these issues. That was largely started because of Stephanie Jones Rogers, and then because of Dr. Logan. So I would say that there's more of an opportunity to add in the case of reparations based on this research rather than against.
Thank you for your answer, sir. Thank you guys for taking my call. I'll mute my line.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Retired firefighter in Florida, did you have a question? That's Trevon that was on my mind. Retired firefighter, did you have a question, sir?
Yes, sir. To the guests, being that you are rather young in studying on the subject and putting out information, what is your personal ultimate goal into doing this specifically type of research that you agreed upon? It's called racism, white supremacy. Well, what are your future goals and plans?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you know, a very open book right now. I've thoroughly enjoyed the research that we've done and the findings that have come from it. And I think that, like I stated earlier, there's so much more that could be done. And that's how my brain was working when we were finishing this project is, we could include data from all different decades at this time. We could also include data from different auction houses for enslaved people. And, you know, that's something that even if I, you know, worked my entire life for, there would still be even more. So I think as a goal, you know, continuing to be involved in this topic and continuing to add to what we know in congruence with people like Dr. Logan, who are much, much more knowledgeable on the topic than I am, even after my measly 2 years of research on it. I think it would be an incredible goal to continue these findings and keep building on research, on this research and on research like it.
Is the ultimate would have something to do with solving the problem?
I mean, you know, that would be, I think, a very, very difficult thing to do, but, you know, working towards solutions, working towards finding more information, you working towards research that is able to be used in policy building could be a certain goal of mine, because so much of current policy that's written is based on economic research. I think economic history needs to be part of that, and what we've learned over these years in researching this specific topic and others like it. So I don't know if I'm certain that there is even a one solution, but leading to change in the positive direction is absolutely a goal.
Thanks for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Man, I'm going to make sure I get in the conclusion because they ended well. I went back to look at the front page to see the listing of the names on the report. They have lots of great references here as well. I was going through to look at some of the citations, like, ooh, check that out. Ooh, check that out too. They have the distinctively black names. That's one of the citations as well. Always look at the reference section, at least give a quick glance. Despite the appearance of significant institutional barriers, white women played a prominent and regular role in the market. The motivations, incentives, and returns to their involvement in enslavement should merit renewed interest among historians, economists, sociologists, and scholars of gender more generally. Absolutely. Co-conspirators. You cannot have a system of white supremacy or a plantation without white women. Co-conspirators. That's it. Last two questions I had before. I think we got all our callers too. We can let you enjoy the rest of your Monday evening. White man, Mr. Benton Wishart, who do you think is more informed about what racism, white supremacy is, and how it works in terms of the day-to-day operations, all areas of people activity? Who do you think has more information about that system? The people who are classified as white or the people who are not white?
I think clearly not white people have more knowledge on the subject. I think it would be hard to have any white person have a total and in-depth understanding of the problems that might ail someone who is not white. And this goes into almost any subject in economics and just in life. I think it would be hard for anybody who's white to fully understand that.
I see. You are a white man and you're informed about racism. You wrote this or co-authored this report, helped put the research together, and took classes from Dr. Logan and all of that. I mean, a lot of black people in Ohio have never had opportunity to go and take Dr. Logan's class. So you as a white man are informed about racism, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know. Last question. Did you know, I mentioned it before, did you know Jeffrey Dahmer, OSU alumnus? He didn't graduate, but he for sure took classes there. Did you know that?
I did know that. I have the unfortunate fact that I'm also from Milwaukee, Wisconsin originally. So not only did I go to the same school as Jeffrey Dahmer, but also lived in the same city that he lived in after school. So yes, I was aware.
What in the chocolate sauce? Oh my goodness.
I know.
I cannot believe.
Yeah.
What in the... Now talk about... Now didn't I say we don't... The homoeroticism and we don't talk about... Oh my gosh. Were you there when all that happened? Not born yet?
No, I think that was... What year was that? That was really...
94,
what was that,
93?
Like 25 years... Okay, 30 years ago. Yeah, no, I was not yet born. I was born in 2002, so...
Okay. Wow. Did you know about all of that growing up, though, while you were in Wisconsin?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Not only that, but also going to Ohio State. I mean, he was in either Lincoln or Morrill Tower, which is one of the two towers on campus, one of the two dormitories. So, I mean, you could have the sorry responsibility of potentially living in the same dorm room that Jeffrey Dahmer once lived in.
Wow. Is this something that they still talk about, like lore at OSU? Like, oh man, that's where old Dahmer.
Not really. It's right. I don't know if it's public what dorm room he lived in, but I do know that new freshmen did just move into the dorms at OSU. So there is somebody out there not too far away from me who is, sitting in the same room that Jeffrey Dahmer once lived in for a year. So.
Well, that is an end note for sure. I had it. We were going to get Wisconsin in there somehow, some way.
Exactly.
Dr. Logan, he went to UW at Madison. So I was going to ask him, like, were you there when the whole Dahmer thing went down? Oh, my goodness. I cannot believe it. Incredible. Dahmer's world, we're just hanging out like he never left us. We have been chatting OSU co-alumnus with Dahmer, Mr. Benton Wishart, who was not at the Olympics but could have been. Excellent research. We'll be looking for, I guess, future material. If it's going to be related more, we certainly need more material on the role of white women in all of this. So if you're going to do more of that, man, we will be waiting anxiously for your next publication. Get to it. I really learned a ton. I'll be working to see, maybe the next time we talk, I'll have my own certificate of good character.
Thank you. I really appreciate coming on to this talk. I'm always appreciative of being able to discuss the topic. Again, like I said, this is something that everybody needs to know. Whether my name's attached to it or not, just get it out there, talk about it. It needs to be in high school curriculum. It certainly needs to be in college curriculum. And I'm deeply grateful that I was able to be involved in finding out this new information. And in discussing it with everybody here. So thank you.
Much obliged, Mr. Benton Wishart, and absentia, Dr. Trevon D. Logan. Enjoy the rest of your summer evening and keep up the great work, Dr. Wishart. Or not doctor, not yet. Wishful thinking, I guess. Mr. Wishart.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. It was good to talk to you.
For sure. Good evening. Context of White Supremacy. White women do it better. Talked about that for so many years. Stephanie Jones Rogers, they were her property. Super important reading. I didn't realize that book has been out for at least 5 years at this point. So, yes, you should definitely have a copy. They probably have paperback versions of it by now, even though that is a book worthy of having a hardback copy. Stephanie Jones Rogers, black female, they were her property. And then this work that we talked about today, building on her scholarship. Fun fact, how we got to our guest today, who I thought it was going to be two, would have been wacky to have Dr. Logan here as well, black male, just, to hear his thoughts about the publication, the naming and all of that, and then some of the other data as well. But the whole, or I guess the process of how I found out about the material for today, a listener, they sent the document to me and they said that white women, they study racism, which is 100% accurate. They do. But he said they study racism because it was ostensibly two white women on The Economist who were discussing the report. And I noted, I said, wow, well, I think these might be two white women on The Economist, but most of this is talking about a black female, Stephanie Jones Rogers, and her studies of white supremacy racism, and then the scholarship of Mr. Benton and Dr. Logan, white man, black male, who are building on the scholarship of a black female. So I thought that was curious that yes, white women, yes, they do study racism, but this is mostly about the studies of black female scholar Stephanie Jones Rogers. They were her property. Anywho, I remember back when that book came. It's been 5 years. Like I said, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years. President Trump was in the White House when that was first published. Anyway, we'll be here on Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The Zebra Murders, which, man, fascinating. San Francisco pops up in so many ways, like all roads lead to San Francisco and Jeffrey Dahmer. But Zebra Murders, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We haven't even got to, I don't know. I don't really think there are good parts to nonfiction books. I think that's more of a fiction. Like you can have what's your favorite part of Harry Potter, right? I don't really know if there's what's your favorite part of medical apartheid? What's your favorite part of the Zebra Murders? When they were going to cancel the Christmas party because the black people were going to anyway, so we haven't got to the really intense scene where they start rounding up large numbers of privileged black males in San Francisco, like Lynn Swan. That is coming, escalating. Part that we're getting to now. Again, the address for the temple where the suspected Negro hooligans who hate and kill white people is 1809 Geary Boulevard. That's the black Muslim temple where they loiter and kick it. The address for Jim Jones and the People's Temple is 1859 Geary Boulevard. 1809 1859. It's a block. It's a block. You get a tricycle, man. I mean, I think almost any capacity, even if you are elderly, you got one of those walker type things. It's a block. I think you could probably do that. You got one of those scooters, right? I mean, like the motorized one. If you're elderly, got mobility issues, it's a block. I think the most issue might crossing the street and you are at the corner, so you got a crosswalk. Press the button and wait. Wait for the white man, flashing white man, and you will be straight. They might even have an officer to wave you across the street, but it's a block. From the People's Temple to the black Muslim temple that spawned these alleged Negro killers. Wacky. I'm even more intrigued because Jim Jones had so little to say about all this, and it literally happened on their doorstep. Why weren't they out picketing, protesting? They're probably smacking around police. San Francisco police were probably smacking around People's Temple members, black male ones anyway. You don't have anything to say about all this? And it went on for so long, the trial and everything. Fascinating. The zebra murder. And at the same time, so they got the Zebra Murders and the Black Panthers and the Symbionese Liberation Army. They got all these snakes. Wow, that's part of their logo. 7-headed serpent for the Symbionese Liberation Army and the Black Guerrillas. Gorillas, panthers, zebras, snakes, niggers, apes, alligators, coons, possums. San Francisco, 1974. Wacky time. And drugs. Oh my goodness. Sobriety would be best. We'll take a quick break, come back, few thoughts, what we heard from the report, and a few extra tidbits. Context of White Supremacy. We'll be right back.
The longer we are here, the more contaminated and the more toxic we become. Now, what is the nature of the toxicity and the nature of the contamination? The basic contamination comes from concepts that we are given these concepts that are implanted in our brains that are white concepts that are used to destroy us. Now, I want to go back before I go deeper into that. The first law of life is the law of self-preservation. And our self-preservation button for a vast majority of our people is in the off position, meaning this, that when you are in, or when a person is in an environment that is dangerous or unsuitable, the person must adapt to the environment or die. There's a great, great article that I posted on a BB Toomey Casa, and I have to go back and try to find it. In some, it might have been Yellowstone Park, but don't quote me on that. What the forestry did was to remove wolves from that environment for like 3 generations. And I think it was the elk were in there, or deer or something were, grazing in this park. And they were grazing for 3 generations, never threatened. The forestry decided to reintroduce the wolves back into the environment. And the wolves, being the animals they are, approached these deer or these elk. And the deer or elk just looked up at them and never ran. That's amazing, because the older elk and deer knew that the wolves would hunt them and kill them. So imagine yourself being a wolf and you're approaching this deer, and the deer's not running. You say, "Oh my goodness,
right.
This is a great meal for me." And this is what happened. And the wolves ravished the elk and the deer and destroyed them, because the elk and the deer, their self-preservation button had been shut off, and they were not able to recognize danger. So either we adjust to the environment or we die.
The Grandcestor, Dr. Kamau Kamban, Context of White Supremacy. Again, here Thursday, book club, The Zebra Murders, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Can I get a quick moment? This is not a promo for a specific product. I always hate mentioning specific products because I'm not like a paid sponsor, or I'm not sponsored by anyone to shill for their products and, oh my goodness, go out and get these veggie dogs, or, anything like that. But I'd mentioned my Vitamix blender many times, and, different veggie concoctions. I've said, even, stripping the name, eating quality foods. Mr. Fuller talks about that in 4 things that non-white people can and should be doing to replace white supremacy with justice: eating correctly. Getting a quality blender can be a great aid in that process, especially if you struggle to eat fruits, vegetables, raw fruits, vegetables. Having a quality blender, really big smoothies, summertime, that sort of thing, meal replacements, they can be great for that, and so much more. So I've talked about my Vitamix. Had it for 4 years at this point. Part of their selling point is, they're nearly indestructible, and they have people who have their Vitamix for 20 years. I know people who've had their Vitamix for, 5, 10 years, use it all the time. Had my Vitamix, was going to make my smoothie, it broke. I'm furious, disgruntled, because I missed out on my smoothie that I was salivating for and all the rest of it. However, along with everything else that they sell, they say, hey, they do have really long warranties that they do honor very well. I was about to pout and gripe about not having my Vitamix. I packed it up, sent it off, got it back in, I think 7. I sent it on, I got it back in 7 days exactly. I sent it last Monday. It came back so fast. In fact, I did not even have time to pout about it being gone. I was trying to be prepared because I thought it would be weeks or something like that, and bang, I didn't even have all my treats and stuff together so that I could get back to smoothieing and everything else. And when that happened, I said, oh, I at least have to, that would be an add to the great add to the kitchen appliances. Anything that has a great warranty where they will take care of it. Got a brand new pitcher and working correctly and all spiffy and ready to blend. That was a part of the logic I remember hearing. Vitamix blenders are very expensive, so certainly you don't have to get a Vitamix. You can get a blender that is great, that is not one of those, and you can always wait until Vitamix blenders go on sale end of the year, so you got your heads up like around so-called Christmas and other times. They will go on sale, and I mean, you could save hundreds of dollars, literally. That said, I remember part of the selling point being you could invest this money into this blender, or you could get a cheaper model, and 10 years from now, you'll have that same Vitamix that you spent the money on. After 10 years, you'll still have that great, and you can make amazing all kinds of yumminess. Or over that 10 years, you might have to get 7, 8 other blenders by the time those have broken and all the rest over that time period. Probably would be accurate. And Vitamix, you can make way more than smoothies. Soup, smoothies, all kinds of peanut butter, you name it. Ice cream, you name it. All kinds of stuff. I'm always stunned when I bump into folks who have a Vitamix that they don't use. They say they have a Vitamix. Even some C.O.W.S listeners, they have a Vitamix, and it is permanently parked like in the lowest, least accessible cabinet or in the attic or someplace like that, in the closet in the kitchen or something. Like, what? Even as a food processor, absolutely amazing, just in terms of the wide variety of products you can make. I make nacho cheese, vegan of course, plant-based, nacho cheese all the time. That is amazing. You wouldn't even be able to tell you could fool meat eaters and tell them it's regular dairy cheese and they wouldn't know the difference. It is amazing. And they have whole recipe books and YouTube channels and all the rest of it. Either way, I'm a much happier camper, and even can update, as I said, since I have talked about my Vitamix at great length before. Broken, fixed, back in business, 7 calendar days. Not too shabby. Ready to roll. Ready to get back to my frozen watermelon smoothie. Now, for the broadcast for today, and I guess they have the DNC in Chicago, so I have to pay attention to see if anything wacky happens while all of that is transpiring in Illinois. Shout to Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Pamela Evans Harris, Lauren Cress Love, Bubbly Creek, Harold Washington, Obeezy. Do we get? That's probably enough. Let's see. But man, that portion of the broadcast were Mr. Benton Wishart, and again, we were supposed to have Dr. Logan too, but he had a conflict of schedule. Oh well, we may do. With Mr. Wishart, his name is first. The reason that I contacted he and not Dr. Logan is because his name is first. I don't even think I normally, tell you all that I will look and I'll seek out the white person. For this one, I didn't have to do that because the name that's first is Mr. Wishart. So I contacted him. He said, oh, well, we'll see if we can get our co-author too, and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. It took the course of me going to look, be like, wait a minute, Dr. Logan is like all accomplished, and you're doing research for him. How is your name first? Like, what? Amazing. They have whole like reports and what have you about just getting your name on those published studies. And I know he said it's not published yet, working paper, we'll have to see and all that, but I suspect it will be published. That is enormous. He talked about that as well. Man, that so frequently in the academy, at least in the U.S., I suspect elsewhere, at least in the U.S., if you are a researcher or what have you, you might get an acknowledgement, a shout out or something at the bottom of the report or something like that. It would not be your name is even mentioned, much less your name is first on the report. Like, what? What? Wild. Just wild. And even, you heard, I asked him, he said, Dr. Logan could have published this and not even put his name on it. He's a doctor. I mean, he's got a lot of published material. Just, wow. Wow. I don't know if that is white supremacy, racism. Maybe Dr. Logan does that for all of his research students and such, economists that come through. I'd be interested to know the demographics of his class. Maybe he has, lots of black people, black males, black females, that he does the same thing. He's trying to help create new scholars and what have you. So I'll give a little push where I can and put their name on the credentials and all that. But just, wow. That is, wow. I have to ponder on that for a second. Incidentally, Dr. Trevon Logan, he has a book that talks about male sex workers, economics, sexuality, and male sex work. Now, I was going to ask a quick question from that book and then link that back to the piece on white women's involvement in the sex trade and even rethinking Rufus. But, oh man, this is just a quick snippet, even in the spirit of Jeff Dahmer. This is from page 26 of Economics, Sexuality, and Male Sex Work. The male hustler was a man's man, a masculine man with few, if any, observable traits that would label him a homosexual. In the scholarship on male prostitution in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, this modern male hustler archetype featured prominently. This type of male sex worker was a hoodlum or thug who sought to use prostitution for wage income, rejecting the formal labor market. The fact that these men were presumably heterosexual added to their allure in a gay subculture that socially celebrated non-traditional representations of masculinity, but still held traditional male masculinity as a sexual ideal. In fact, the development of modern male physique and bodybuilding industries has direct links to male sex work. Men in the earliest era of bodybuilding would seek male sponsors, an arrangement that would allow them to concentrate on weight training. The early history of physique modeling is replete with men who used their masculine and muscular appearance in exchange for remuneration that freed them from the formal labor market. See, that was required to slip in a quick question just about then. When I read that, so many things came to my brain computers. Who is the quintessential thug on the plantation? In fact, as I continue, they said trying to get free from the formal labor economy and all of that. Are they talking about Leroy? Because they don't mention anything about racial classification, but are they talking about Leroy? When they were talking about the gay people, because they don't mention racial classification, but I think these are white people, white gay men who would be in position to sponsor a bodybuilder and take advantage of them. Terry Crews, when he said that their ideal sexually is the same masculine, thuggy, muscular image, I said it almost sounds like what Dr. Wells in Chicago, what she said? Tall, dark, handsome, thug. That rethinking Rufus, Jeff Dahmer, Ronald J. Dominic, he said he liked the thug, muscular thug type too. Remember we read about him? That was also in New Orleans. Oh, that was during Katrina where he was killing. They said, who knows how many people killed? You know, you got bodies floating around and niggras is niggras. And, you know, who knows? Lord works in mysterious ways. But they like that thug body type. Yes. Delectable Negro. I was going to ask Dr. Logan about that. Rethinking Rufus. And then I was going to get into, Dr. Logan, you were in Madison, Wisconsin. Were you there when old Jeff Dahmer, when he was eating thugs? That was in Milwaukee, not Madison, but close enough. I was going to ask that, but we got to it either way. How about that? Either way, let's see. The last thing I get in, we got Dahmer either way, and then more white women involved in the sale and transaction of slaves in Mississippi than white men. I found that staggering because that is such an affront to the normal lie that we have been told that this is white men's work and white male patriarchy, and white women, they were victims too. Wrong. And then, like I said, I had to read it 3 or 4 times because he says in the book, as the table shows, the rate of female involvement as sellers in the New Orleans slave trade was much higher than males for those from California, Florida, Illinois again, Massachusetts, New York, and Texas. For buyers in the New Orleans slave trade, females were more involved than males in Alabama, Mississippi, and Pennsylvania. As the table shows, the rate... Oh, okay, I read that one. Yeah. But I mean, that one staggered me. I just was not prepared for that. You have more white females involved in selling niggras in California and Florida than white men? What? What? We have been master deceivers. Master deceivers. The same way that lynching is constructed as this is white men's work. No, man. Go around and put those white women back in. Dr. Tommy J. Curry, he talked about the deliberate lies to purify the white woman. Oh, no. We won't sully so-called her hands. No. She is so-called lily white. No, she wouldn't lynch no niggras. She wouldn't sell no niggras. She wouldn't rape no niggras. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Go back and do the lynching pictures and put a white one. Carolyn Bryant Donham. Put her out there castrating Emmett Till. Put her right there front row. Slave auction, go. White women go down the line. Put them out there leading the chain gang to auction. How much can I get for this nigger? He's a healthy nigger. Look at him. Healthy. All his teeth. Look at him. White women. Don't tell me about no Simon LeGrier and all that. I can't even think of no representation when you got white women on the plantation that's well known. 12 years a slave, I guess, is hinted at, but I mean, nah, man, show me a white woman got whip in hand. Get my niggers, get out here, we're going to market, let's go. Dramatize that, man. Steven Spielberg, hook that up. Is that in Amistad? Because I don't remember that at all. California. They lie and say they didn't even have slavery in California, much less white women selling niggras in California. I don't use that word enslaved. Just want to make sure I get that in. It's not that I'm, brawl about it or fuss with anybody, but there is no dignity to be restored. If I'm on a plantation, call me a slave, man. What do you mean? There's no need to pretty that up at all. You don't need to call me a forced laborer, enslaved, none of that. The offense, I'm on the plantation. Call me a slave. When that's been corrected, then you don't have to do this anymore. Hey, I'm still a slave now. Calling me enslaved does not make my situation any better. Anyway, let's see. Folks have thought they need to share listener-supported counter-racist radio. Invest. If you think the C.O.W.S is constructive, hit the blog racism-notes.blogspot.com. racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener-supported counter-racist radio. You'll see the PayPal button in the top right corner beneath the PayPal button. You'll see the links: PayPal, Cash App, and Venmo. Cash App address: cash.app/$the C.O.W.S. Much obliged to all the investors who kept us broadcasting 15 plus years. Hopefully worthy of your time and energy. You can also hit the Amazon wish list under Gus T. Renegade. Enormous thanks to all the folks who've nabbed an item or three over the 15 years. Let's see. Stephanie Jones Rogers' book title, again, They Were Her Property: White Women and the Economy of American Slavery. Excellent material, and all on those no-count white co-conspirators. Co-conspirators. Let's see if folks have any thoughts, what they heard from Mr. Wishart. Let's see. We did not hear from non-Clemson Dad at all, so we'll see if they had thoughts, observations, and then we'll nab our other folks. Let's see. Folks in South Carolina, where they also sold a number of niggras. I suspect white women heavily involved there as well.
Yes, hello, this is Mama C. I just wanted to share a little bit more context. I know for sure that the guest, he was being very deceptive when Gus asked the question about, the makeup of his economic classes. So first and foremost, I'm on the Ohio State University webpage on the racial demographic, gender demographic, and more women attend Ohio State. It's basically 50-50, but slightly more females attend, first and foremost. And then I went to the awarded majors or awarded degrees. And for males, it's general finance, which falls under business, and econometrics and quantitative economics, which also falls under business. So just some context, OSU is known for its business school. I don't recall what it's called, but as somebody who went to a neighboring state university with a similar makeup of white people, I knew that he was being deceptive. And while it is true that you will find more non-white people in the lower, like the intro levels of econ, so macroeconomics, E202, and microeconomics, E201, once you get up into the 300 levels and 400 levels, as he said, yes, you'll see far fewer non-white people. And again, going back to the makeup, they said primarily you'll find white females, white males and then Asian females on campus. So Asian people make up more of the population than Black people at OSU, if that tells you anything. So for females, for female majors, it's mostly like nursing, social work, psychology, maybe a little bit of biology and medicine. So that just goes to show you that by the time you get to the upper level econ classes, you're looking at primarily male students. You may have a female here or there, but white male students. As somebody who graduated with an econ degree, I know that firsthand. So he was being very deceptive with that. And I thought it was brilliant that the listeners, they asked the question about why his name was listed first. And I went to his LinkedIn account, and Mr. Benton Wishart, he got a 34 out of 36 on his ACT. So maybe he cheated, or maybe he's just exceptionally brilliant. And that's why Dr. Logan brought him in to work as a research assistant. But at first, I was so confused. I thought he was a PhD or PhD candidate or a master's degree candidate. But then when he was talking about like juniors and seniors and all of that, we realized that he was an undergrad and he just finished his bachelor's degree. Normally, most professors, they are using their undergrad or master's level students or even PhD students to do the grunt work for whatever research they're pursuing. And then, they're getting that experience and that guidance and the oversight and being able to, add that to their resume. But their names would not at all be found on the papers, or, it would be far down the list. So again, it was very, very surprising that I don't know what stage this research is, if it's a white paper, if it's been published, or if it's going to become some sort of book or whatever. But I just thought it was brilliant that everyone, asked him about that, like, why is his name listed first? And in most situations, whenever somebody's name is listed first, they have like a degree of power. So again, I looked at his LinkedIn account, and he is on the fast track for a PhD professor at one of these universities. And, I definitely think it has a lot to do with white supremacy. I don't know how he got aligned with the professor and was able to, figure out how to be the face of it and be the spokesperson for all questions, to receive inquiries from people like Gus or journalists or whatever, interviews and everything, versus the professor. But I was just very surprised by this whole interview. With that, I will end my share.
Much obliged. Mama C suspects he might have cheated on his ACT. That's funny. Much obliged. There's lots of cheating. You're just talking about that, neutralizing workplace racism. I too was, staggered. I was figuring out with you all in terms of why is his name first on the. I even had to go back because I was thinking like maybe I'm not remembering it correctly. So I went back and looked, and yep, name is first. And I've seen it like on a number because like if you download a report, it might look a little different if you read it online. But I've seen it a number of ways where his name is listed first. He gave some of the logic as to, why that is. But, man, I think I asked him. This report could have been published with Dr. Logan, black male's name exclusively. We wouldn't have even we might not have even heard about this report, which is kind of a bummer because it does have important information, but we wouldn't even have heard about, this report. But they put his name at the top, or I don't know. I think he said, he did the data component, so, I guess there may have been some thought about that. My thinking was that Dr. Logan, and this even connects to her question, great insight about the demographics of the econ students. My thinking, Dr. Logan, black male, I don't know. Maybe he has, some sort of what they call it pipeline where he can track the limited number of non-white students in, because Mr. Wishart, he said that they talked about racism in the class, so-called segregation and slavery and blah, blah, blah. So maybe he has a way to attract, to get in, an irregularly high number of black non-white students in the class. Maybe. I don't know. I wish he had been here, because then we could have asked directly, like, what's bang? But maybe he does this sort of thing deliberately with his research students, Dr. Logan, I mean. He'll put their name on the report, help them, oh, wow, you helped get this together, blah, 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 to help kind of give a springboard to their career, and thinking, I'm privileged black male. They made it difficult to me, so I help them my research. Maybe. I would have been curious to know, like, what are the demographics of your other research students? Like, getting at your point, like, do you have, like, lots of black people that work for you, lots of non-white people in total that research, help you, publish report? You're doing the same thing, putting their name on reports. Now, if that's the case, I guess bravo. Kind of a bummer that we got the time that it helped out a white dude, as usual. But if this sort of thing happens and he's making a pipeline to do this for other non-white scholars, especially black scholars, wow, that is amazing. I don't know if that's the case, but I was thinking that. Maybe, I don't know. We'd have to wish we could have had Dr. Logan here, but either or, wow. Just, I cannot even, they were just, the Olympic, we talked about the Olympics. They were just talking about Tyrese Halliburton, Jason Tatum. These are gifted, multi-million-dollar NBA athletes who were on the men's USA basketball team, did not play. Sharing jokes and saying they got an A on the school project and didn't do nothing. Just participated, showed up, kept the seat warm, stirred the Gatorade, that sort of thing. Hey, that could have been easy the case here. Showed up, did well, got my name on the report, didn't do nothing. That sort of thing happens all the time in the system of white supremacy racism for people classified as white. Jason Tatum, Tyrese Halliburton, that's one of the few times I'm aware of where some non-white people didn't have to do nothing. I kept my feet up. Got an A+. Like, what? That happens for white people all the time. Skyrocket to your, even Mike Swango, the people that I mentioned, Mike Swango and Sue Klebold and all of that, like, man, to even get access to Ohio State University and take a class like that, like, I wish that's one. I wish we'd had Dr. Logan here. What are the demographics for your class? How many black people specifically are in your class? Oh, well, excellent point. Glad we got that in both ways. Typical demographics for the econ department, and yeah, that is, I don't know what to say. That they have whole reports about that in terms of getting your name on that report and recognition and what that means for your career, especially in the academy and all the rest. And how deliberately white men will leave names off of what Mama C said. The grunts do all that hard, and they won't even put your name on. You won't even get the title. Like, nope, no medal for you, Tyrese Halliburton. Get on out of here. We're gonna take all the credit. that sort of thing. That is very, very common. Almost, I'd say that is the standard way that it's done. The standard way it's done. Dr. Logan publishes that report. We would have never heard about Mr. Wishart. You would have had to read like the fine print, maybe get down somewhere, and they're like, oh, acknowledgments, Ben Wishart, all your hard work, right on. other folks who dialed in. Let's see. The Black African 2262, retired firefighter in Florida. If y'all had commentary.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the reason I guess that I asked about his name being first was, and also the data portion. I'm asking him about like his education at the time of when this was completed. Was the way, I guess, yeah, the questioning that the way that you were questioning him was just kind of revealing, like it just kept revealing more and more, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not like this is not like somebody that was, had a master's or a PhD. This was like, he was talking about being a junior, I believe, and a senior. So I was just like, no, this doesn't add up in my mind. That's when I Googled and saw, oh, wait a minute. I saw like the first article, his name was first. Then I was like, oh, okay. Scroll down, his name is first. Scroll down, his name is first. I was like, wait. So I had to ask him about it. And when you asked him about it, it was very telling, because I think this is where, I guess, white supremacy, racism, and him being a white man, when he was giving his response, at some point, he called Dr. Logan. Because I think he was getting angry at us questioning, like, wait a minute, why do you have credit for this? Yeah, he called Dr. Logan, and I wrote it down, like right when he said it. VGQ to me, but at the age and at the at the educational level of this gentleman, I was in a similar field, accounting, and took similar courses. I would say when it comes to data manipulation, just the understanding of data, I would say I was stupid. Compared to once I graduated and went to work and then went back to school, some of the things that that's why I asked him about, what tools he was using, what he was doing in data manipulation, data gathering, and that even deleting duplicates, depending on the type of data that you have in Excel and the number of columns, it can be an arduous task. Like like it can be something that you're working at, you have to rest and then come back, and then, because you have to select the columns correctly, which column impacts which column. I'm thinking, maybe this gentleman, he's a genius and whatnot, but I just don't. I'm just wondering how many, if possible, errors might have been made, because, data, I think you need a lot more experience, a lot more work experience, if you're going to be working with data and statistics. And that was my first job, just in case. I worked as a statistical researcher. So I think overall, like, a really great program. Hopefully there isn't flaws in his work where in the future Dr. Logan gets blamed for it. And then I don't think he told the truth about the white women in his life being not objecting to this type of work, or at least not questioning it. Thank you.
That's funny. He doesn't think the white women would have been so pleased or at least neutral about these findings. The presumed white women at The Economist who were talking about this report, they seemed neutral, if not excited about the data. They didn't seem opposed to it, I'll say. I'll put it that way. But maybe they were just being professional journalists, master deceivers, and masking their disdain for the information. Either way, I was with everyone else in discovery, as it was, we were talking to him like, oh, wait a minute, like, this guy is not like a professor, Dr. Logan. And I told you that Dr. Logan is the professor. And again, some of the confusion started with the naming. Like, that's why all that stuff is important. The white guy's name is first. Like I said, maybe Dr. Logan has a whole program. This is done deliberately. He's trying to help out. Bravo. And if he's doing this and getting a lot of non-white students to get that sort of benefit, A plus. Might even say that's workplace counter racism. And it just so happened that he, helped out this white dude this one time around. If that's what it is, bravo. But wow. Like, man, that is wild. But I was learning with all of you. Like, wow, this is a white dude who just graduated? What? Why is his name first? And I think every report, like, I think the Black African just said, the report that I downloaded, and then looking online at, when you can read it online and such, I think all the places that I've seen it in different ways that it's formatted, it's the white man's name is first. And it also, Dr. Logan could also be established enough at this point. I don't know if he has tenure and all that, but he could be established enough that, I don't need to pile up 50,000 reports or what have you. I'm a privileged black male, like for real. So, I can help out my researchers, get them off to a good start in their career, do a little giving back. That could be. Let's see. 2262, did you have commentary?
Have you heard?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The guest was interesting. I noticed when he brought up the numbers, he did say that they're either I guess not as accurate. I believe he said that, and they're still developing more upon this data. I thought that was interesting that after doing this extensive research for 2 years, and they're still kind of developing where to go with it. That's what I thought was interesting about it.
Oh, okay. Was that it? Just making sure we didn't miss you. Was that your commentary?
Yes. I was a little confused by the amount of time they put into it, and I guess the research is still developing, or you couldn't make a opinion either way about what can be used for. That's what I was thinking about.
Guess they could say they're still learning too, I reckon, or I don't know. The Black African said that, he's so young, this is, complicated material, and sorting all of this information, I think, would require a little bit more expertise and might have some serious flaws or what have you. Hopes Dr. Logan doesn't get blamed for that at some point. Hopefully that's not the case at all, but just something that he did think, since he's so young, just starting out in his career with all of this, and even conceded maybe he's brilliant. Maybe he did not cheat on his ACTs. He really is brilliant white man. Maybe. They said that about Swenga. Let's see. I thought that was so wacky that he did know Jeff Dahmer, OSU. Like, woo, woo. Even for the prevalence, the ubiquitous nature of white serial killers. Like, that would be something I'd be curious just to see. How much is Jeffrey Dahmer talked about at Ohio? Even Michael Swango. How much are they talked about at OSU? Like, do people... like he mentioned a specific territory, like, oh yeah, Jeff was right there, blah, blah, blah. And then the added bonus where he grew up in the hometown in Wisconsin too. But like, man, what is white culture if it ain't Jeff Dahmer? Chocolate sauce. Let's see. Retired firefighter in Florida. Did you have commentary?
I was just thinking in critique of the guest with the question that we normally ask the white guest about who is more knowledgeable about racism, white supremacy, in all areas. They state that it's non-white people. Primarily because that's the more comfortable answer to give, and at the same time, it's easy to say the victims. So it would take a lot of the quote unquote responsibility off of them as white people who are either racist or suspected as being racist, and. So he just chalks up as I would guess at this point in time. Well, what's the and I don't want to make it sound like a football game, but what's the score on that? But is the majority of the white guest states that is non-white people or white people?
The majority of guests, period, white and non-white, have said that non-white people are more informed, white people are more confused about what racism, white supremacy is. White people and non-white people have mostly, like overwhelmingly, like 90% and probably more than that, said white people are more confused, non-white people more informed about racism.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that basically, when they affirmatively state that it's the victims who know more about it, it kind of like takes some sort of pressure off of them or responsibility off of them, and unless they're questioned more deeply, the issue would go away, so to speak, at least in the conversation or the interview. That's my thoughts.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. I think that ignorance removes culpability as well, and just the deception. I think seeing this as willful dedication to white supremacy, racism, is very different than white people are just ignorant, unaware, they don't know. That you have very different thoughts about how to address that problem. If this is deliberate, dedication, ignorance, unconscious, very different thought process. Any hoodles. He said the black African said he thought not Dr. Logan, who wasn't here. Mr. Wishart got disgruntled with us, questioning him about his name being at the top. Didn't call him Dr. Logan at one point. Have to go back to point that out. Yeah, that would be interesting, even though he acknowledged this report could have been published without his name on it at all. Same thing Mama C said. That's been my experience, everything that she said, in terms of, if you have, and he confirmed, if you have someone, especially if they have tenure and all that, I don't know if Dr. Logan does, but, oh man, if they're, well situated at their institution, why do I need to include, like, we did this together. I don't need your help, whatever. Like, I'm doing you a favor, giving you an opportunity. And even what the Black African said, while you are still learning, you can make all those errors and mistakes. And since I know what I'm doing and I'm putting this project together, I can go, and since I'm going to have to write it myself anyway, by the time I correct all your errors and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. That's normally about the way it goes, as is my understanding. You get a shout out at the end, maybe. Again, wish Dr. Logan had been, man, that would have been fat. Ooh. On one respect, I wish he could have been here, because then I could have asked about his book on male sex workers and hustlers, Rethinking Rufus, Jeff Dahmer, and Jeff Dahmer, because he was in Wisconsin in the mid-'90s, so I suspect he may have been there when all this, were you writing this book? Anyway, so that's one, or maybe two. And then about this, the naming on the publication, to hear his thoughts about, what thinking went into that. Does he do this often with his students and trying to help them out? Like, that would have been interesting. And even if Mr. Wishart was getting frustrated about that, wow, we've had some dynamics before. We have a black person and a white person, like two guests on together, and just questioning a white person suspected racist, and the black guest gets defensive, like, oh, I'm not saying that would have happened, but just, woof. That's, on the other hand, like, oh, it would have been great to talk to Dr. Logan, to, Jeff Dahmer and all that, but, whew, I have seen that dynamic before, and yeah, I don't know. I generally prefer to talk to one person at a time, and having a white person and a non-white person on together is generally very risky. We are emotionally attached to white people often, and are resistant to honestly addressing white supremacy, racism. So, some things would have been better. Some things, at least it would have been potentially risky. But folks can check it out. See Dr. Trevon Logan, and check out his Twitter, I guess, to see if Trevon is Trevon, see if that is a distinctly black name. See if he's had issues with his name. If he was called Trayvon, as I called him, was he called Trayvon back when everything was going down in 2012, 2013, and other events with his name over the years? Anyway, hopefully folks got something constructive with the exchange. We'll be here Thursday for the book club, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, The Zebra Murders. Everyone satisfied? Anything else they needed to share? Grand. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. We need high-functioning brain computers. Racist man, racist woman, racist child at war with us constantly. Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. no name-calling, no gossiping, no throwaway offspring. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Man, I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.